sesi hari ini berjudul Technology War Map. Beberapa tahun lalu Presiden Putin Rusia mengatakan siapa yang menguasai teknologi dia yang akan menguasai dunia. Dan hari ini kita akan bedah lebih dalam bagaimana peta daripada perkembangan teknologi di dunia dan sangat berhubungan juga dengan politik ya Bapak Ibu yang ada di dunia. Nah, so again Mike and William, thank you so much for joining us on behalf of BSA customer. We'll thank you so much for traveling that far to Jakarta. I hope you enjoy the time. The first question will be on deglobalization. Yesterday we'll talk about the economics, the politics, but today we'll like to talk about the effect on technology sector, right? Please share with us how the world is divided in terms of technology. Would you like to start first, Mike?
Sure. Well, thank you, everybody. There certainly is a division on technology between China and the Western world, deglobalization. If you think about, both countries want to have independent semiconductor and other technologies between isolated from each other. So China has made it clear that they want a self-sustained internal domestic semiconductor industry. The United States, along with Western partners, has put restrictions on some of the higher technology aspects of semiconductors and prevented companies from selling to China. That's problematic, and it raises costs. Deglobalization is not great for capitalism and the greater efficiency of the market. The bottom line is that the US does not want China to have the latest advances in chips used for defense or AI. And because at the same time, the US doesn't want to be entirely reliant on Taiwan or TSMC for their chips. So both countries, China and US, are leading the global spend on capital to build domestic semiconductor industries. I'll rest there and let Will take over.
William, please, if you have things to add. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And I think further to Mike's point on kind of where the divisions lie between the US and China in terms of technology, a big part of also what each country is focused on is also where they're spending their dollars, right? If you take a look at US, it's largely focused on a AI-based technology development where a lot of those applications are being used geared towards, say, corporate productivity gains. A lot of what spend is being used on is to develop and train models that can be used to save costs. A lot of the technology development that we're seeing in China is a little bit more focused on specific, what I'll call kind of national security concerns. But at the same point in time, it's important to note that these technologies, when they're used together, can actually be quite powerful. One of the impressive things that China can do is actually leverage a wealth of information that can be required to improve the AI models that we're seeing being developed in the US. Insofar as hardware development, US maintains a pretty large lead, and I agree with Mike in that we do see some competition, some concern that this technology will be prevented from getting to China. But having said that, we think both sides are looking at technology slightly differently, but there's ways to potentially work together to improve that technology for both sides.
Right, thank you. Bapak Ibu, saya izin translate sedikit Bapak Ibu dari hasil conversation tadi. Jadi pertanyaannya adalah deglobalisasi ini sudah masuk bahkan ke teknologi juga. Nah, tadi saya minta penjelasan kira-kira dunia ini gimana sih, sudah terbelah seperti apa. Dan tadi penjelasan dari Mike adalah memang Amerika dan sekutunya memang udah banyak tidak mau mensuplai banyak barang ke China. Dan terutama itu tadi tentang chips defense, ya tentang military. Dan juga tentang AI, karena AI ini sangat penting untuk perkembangan dunia juga. Dan tadi Pak William juga sangat setuju ya dengan apa yang tadi Pak Mike katakan, memang nih AI ini menjadi kunci yang sangat penting. Dan otomatis China jadi harus mendevelop teknologinya sendiri dan itu tidak mudah tentu saja. Dan tadi Pak Mike juga ada bilang, ini mau gimana pun akan increase cost. Karena namanya deglobalisasi, berarti maunya sendiri-sendiri gitu ya, nggak mau sharing, ya berarti biaya pasti sedikit banyak akan naik. Nah saya izin lanjut untuk pertanyaan kedua Bapak Ibu. Right, the next question will be, technology adoption in general was accelerated thanks to COVID. Now everyone's talking about AI every single day. And Mike said that last night CNBC, 90 minutes, all about NVIDIA, right? So where are we now in the AI adoption process? Early, mid, or late cycle? And please share with us who are the enablers and adopters in AI industry. Maybe William first, thank you.
Sure. I think it's our belief that when it comes to AI adoption, we're still in the very early stages. There's been a lot of investment made, certainly on the hardware side of things, but in some ways, we're really at the beginning stages of, say, the first smartphone. We've made the hardware inventions required to build an ecosystem on top of that. The software will ultimately be developed to utilize that hardware, which we think are still in very early stages now. If I take a look at the slide that we have, right here we show the development of the iPhone, right? So it took almost 7 years between the invention of the iPhone and when 50% penetration was reached in the US for that iPhone. A lot of things needed to happen before we got to even 50% penetration. Similarly, the investments that we're seeing being made into microchips, GPUs, so NVIDIA gets a lot of the attention, but we're still in very early stages where we need additional computing capacity to continue to be able to grow this technology.
Right, thank you. Mike, do you have anything to add, please? Thank you.
Yes, I would agree with Will that we are in the very early stages of AI. My emerging markets equity portfolio manager, who's responsible for technology, would be here with you today, but he is on a technology research trip in Korea and Taiwan. So I asked him about this question about AI. And what he said is, we're very early stages. I think the next real big innovation, and I think this goes along with what Will was saying, would be having AI in your pocket through the smartphone software. It would be like a personal assistant. Beyond that, I don't think we even know what the other applications are for AI. Rich, you asked about enablers and adopters. In Asia technology, the enablers are TSMC and SK Hynix, the large Korean and Taiwan companies. From an adopter perspective, currently from a large corporate perspective, it's the Chinese technology companies, Tencent and Alibaba. But the tailwinds of AI and the adopters will expand well beyond technology into other sectors like healthcare, industrials, education. We're starting to see that, but not at the real level beyond the language models.
Right, thank you. Bapak Ibu, jadi pertanyaan saya adalah tadi kan kita semua satu dunia bicara soal AI. Mike cerita kemarin malam sampai di Jakarta nonton TV CNBC 90 menit isinya Nvidia terus gitu ya, nggak berhenti-berhenti. Nah pertanyaan saya tadi AI adoption ini ada di fase apa? Apakah di early atau awal atau sudah di tengah, di mid atau sudah di late cycle? Dan jawaban dari para kedua panelis kita adalah ini masih sangat awal sekali Bapak Ibu. Jadi ini baru diciptakan hardware-nya gitu kan. Nvidia itu kan ciptakan hardware, banyak semiconductor companies. Ini baru hardware-nya yang tanda kutip meraup semua benefit daripada AI. Tapi ternyata software-nya ini masih panjang. Hardware-nya ini demand-nya aja masih sangat kencang. Jadi ke depannya development untuk software juga upside-nya juga masih sangat banyak. Dan tadi Mike juga mengatakan kalau contoh company-nya ya, tadi kan saya tanya juga siapa sih enabler dan adopter. Enabler itu adalah company-company yang memproduksi hardware-nya gitu ya, barang ininya ya semikonduktornya dan sebagainya. Itu tadi enabler ya. Adopternya adalah yang menggunakan misalnya Microsoft, Apple dan banyak perusahaan lainnya. Dan tadi Mike juga mengatakan AI ini enggak cuman benefit teknologi sektor Bapak Ibu, tapi nanti akan ke semua sektor. Jadi itu kenapa mereka percaya bahwa ini masih sangat early Bapak Ibu, masih panjang sekali jalannya. Dan tadi Pak William juga mengatakan hal yang sama ya, ini adalah sebuah tren yang akan long term dan ini benar-benar baru sangat awal sekali Bapak Ibu. Saya izin lanjut untuk pertanyaan berikutnya. Now I will dig even deeper to US equities, Will. So we know that the Magnificent Seven has been, driving S&P 500 to a very, very long and high rally, right? And NVIDIA is one of the best performing stocks. But the very simple question is, the valuation is extremely high, but is it justified by the fundamental?
Sure. So I think it's a little lower after yesterday. But having said that, we think the valuation for NVIDIA, and I use that as a proxy for information technology more broadly because it is such a bellwether name. We think in the longer term, the valuations that we're seeing are actually fairly reasonable. Near term, it may have a bit of froth, and I think the example that we're seeing is the most recent earnings result that came out of NVIDIA actually beat consensus expectations. But having said that, the stock still declined. So if you look a little bit further into the future, NVIDIA is going to continue to remain a very relevant part of the tech and AI ecosystem. If you think about the demand for their products, we're continuing to see strong demands. Their gross margins are nearly 70%. Their profit margins are nearly 60%. I struggle to think of another name or another company that can drive those sort of financials. And if you look at the hardware spend for large hyperscalers such as Microsoft or Meta, they're allocating about 40% of their hardware budget to continue to demand product from product providers such as NVIDIA. So I think, yes, will there be a few hiccups perhaps in the interim, some volatility associated with concerns around valuation? Perhaps. But in the longer term, we think valuations are reasonable.
Right. Thank you. Jadi pertanyaan saya Bapak Ibu, kita tahu semua saham Nvidia ini naiknya luar biasa ya, kayak roket. Dan setiap kali rilis laporan keuangan bagus. Tapi terakhir sahamnya koreksi. Dan pertanyaannya apakah valuasi terlalu mahal dan fundamentalnya sebenarnya beneran bagus atau enggak? Atau cuman hype? Jawaban dari William tadi adalah ini memang secara fundamental ini saham yang sangat bagus, sangat kuat. Profit marginnya itu 60% Bapak Ibu. Kemudian perusahaan-perusahaan seperti Microsoft dan banyak yang lainnya, itu spend sekitar 40% capex-nya itu akan masuk tanda kutip ke kantongnya Nvidia. Jadi itu kenapa memang Nvidia itu revenue growth-nya itu juga masih sangat kuat. Walaupun in the short term atau di dalam jangka waktu dekat, namanya barang yang udah mahal, ya pasti ada yang mau melakukan take profit. Jadi in the short term ini memang ada volatility, artinya bisa terjadi koreksi, bisa terjadi aksi profit taking karena udah naiknya udah lumayan banyak. Tetapi untuk long term perusahaan ini memang kita tidak bisa bilang fundamentalnya nggak bagus karena bisa dikatakan tidak ada company lain yang lebih bagus fundamentalnya sekuat itu, Bapak Ibu. Alright. So the next question, I think it still relates to AI, right? A few weeks ago, many big tech companies like Microsoft and then Alphabet, they released their earnings and they mentioned that their AI capex related to AI is actually, the depreciation related to capex in AI is actually higher. And they do not have enough strong data to justify that AI has actually generated more higher net income in a significant way. How do you think AI will actually pay off, right? Is it taking like 5, 10 years, 15, or even 2 years? Thank you.
So I left my crystal ball at home. I don't have an exact timeline, but I'll try to do my best. So we're still in the early stages of what we see a pretty revolutionary technology. Unfortunately, this takes a little bit of time for the results to bear out. What we're seeing right now is that things are in the experimentation phase. People are trying to figure out how they can leverage this technology for their particular business. So if you think about the first iPhone, for example, or the first smartphone, you had this device. It could tell time, it could make phone calls, it had a calendar, maybe a calculator, maybe you could write a few notes, send a text message. But we didn't really know how to make it productive, right? And it took time before apps were introduced, an app store came about where you can put more software on there to make your daily life more productive. Similarly, while there's been a lot of investment in the hardware for these technologies, the software is still being developed where people are trying to figure out how to implement and use these technologies to make their businesses more efficient. If I could show a quick slide just in terms of some of the use cases that we're seeing, some businesses are actually implementing AI and they're finding pretty notable cost saves. So not necessarily across just the sectors that you would expect. I think a lot of people consider AI to be in the domain of information technology or financials, but we have evidence from other companies, other sectors. So names like Walmart, which is actually a large retailer, they're saving tons of money as a result of implementing AI. Names like JP Morgan Chase, they're continuing to adopt AI in their processes, and they're saving $1 billion to $1.5 billion in cost savings. Names in the healthcare space, names in other technology sectors, they're also adopting AI. And we think that even though there hasn't been a lot of evidence yet, it's starting to come in. It's just coming in a little bit slower. But the early evidence is convincing that AI can actually drive these cost saves and productivity gains.
Alright, thank you. Bapak Ibu, tadi pertanyaan saya adalah investor ini kan berpikir siapa yang punya capex investasi di AI itu di reward banget, semua sahamnya naik. Tapi belakangan ini ketika Microsoft, ada Alphabet juga merilis laporan keuangan, mereka mencatatkan depreciation cost yang lebih tinggi daripada perkiraan dan langsung sahamnya pada turun. Dan orang jadi bertanya-tanya, AI ini sebenarnya worth it atau enggak? Nah, jawaban dari William adalah AI ini juga nggak mungkin langsung membuahkan net profit yang tinggi tiba-tiba Bapak Ibu. Itu akan perlu waktu. Dan namanya investasi, capex pasti ada depresiasinya. Nah sekarang memang jujur belum terlalu langsung ke reflect ke bottom line atau ke langsung laba perusahaan. Tetapi tadi disebutkan perusahaan seperti Walmart, JP Morgan, ada di healthcare sector juga. Mereka itu bisa hemat biaya sangat-sangat besar sekali. Gitu. Tetapi memang masih perlu waktu karena kan namanya investasi di awal akan ke-offset sama benefitnya. Nah benefitnya ini yang belum sebesar yang diekspektasi sama investor. Nah itulah kenapa itu bisa menjadi tadi source of volatility juga, orang bisa take profit. Tetapi over the long term, efisiensi, effectiveness-nya ini akan terus meningkat Bapak Ibu. Alright, thank you Will. I'll move on to Mike. So the Asian technology sector is quite dominated by these semiconductor producers, like you mentioned, Samsung, TSMC, SK Hynix. But can they maintain their dominance in the industry for the long term, considering that competition is getting tougher?
Yes, and I'll just keep this quick to about 3 comments. One, if you look at leading edge chips 20 years ago, there were 30 companies making the highest technology chips. Today, that number is down to 3. TSMC, Samsung, and Intel. That's the first point. Second point, when you look historically at technological advances, the enablers have maintained their share, their large share, throughout the cycle. So we would expect that to continue with semiconductors and AI and the Asian technology. The third is what we've touched on earlier, just the cost of capital in building new fabs. A new fab today will cost $20 billion, and it will take 2 to 3 years to come online. That's a pretty hefty investment for any newcomer to fund and to have the technology to support that. Finally, the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing in the US and China preventing some of that high-end technology from crossing borders is another reason why I think that the Asian technology leaders will maintain their dominance for the foreseeable future.
Alright, thank you. Bapak Ibu, tadi pertanyaan saya adalah di Asia itu kan kebanyakan perusahaannya seperti Samsung, Taiwan Semiconductor, ada SK Hynix juga. Nah mereka ini adalah yang kita sebut tadi enabler, jadi menjual hardware-nya. Nah pertanyaan saya adalah dengan demand yang begitu tinggi sekarang, apakah nanti akan muncul kompetitor yang lebih banyak lagi sehingga profit mereka nggak bisa terlalu bagus? Jawaban dari Mike adalah tidak semudah itu. Jadi dulunya ada 30 Bapak Ibu pemain, sekarang di dunia yang dominan itu cuma 3 atau 4. Ada Intel di US ya, Samsung di Korea, SK Hynix di Korea, dan TSMC di Taiwan. Nah tidak semudah itu mereka bisa menciptakan satu pabrik baru dan langsung masuk ke kompetisi ini gitu ya. Jadi mereka akan tetap memaintain dominasinya dan mereka tetap akan bisa mencetak laba yang sangat kuat. Pada kesimpulannya high barrier to entry. Jadi sangat sulit untuk masuk ke industri ini dan tiba-tiba langsung banyak kompetisi gitu ya Bapak Ibu. Alright, the next question would be, many investors think that China is no longer investable, although many big fund houses still think that China is the market they cannot ignore. Some of them even maybe double down on China. Please share with us the outlook for Chinese technology giants like the ATM, Alibaba, Tencent, and Meituan, and many others.
Sure, thank you for that. Here on the slide, you can see the weight of China historically in the MSCI Emerging Markets Index, dating back the last 20 years. So back in 05, 06, it was high single-digit weight. It peaked right around COVID, the pandemic, at 34%. Right after that is when Alibaba was going to IPO Ant Financial, and it was nullified by regulators in China. That pretty much set China on a path to diminish their weight in the index. That being said, it's still 20%. It's too big to ignore, and I think investors really need to sharpen their pencil and do the work, because there's an underlying quality of earnings from a fundamental bottom-up perspective that you can see in a lot of Chinese companies, both the leading companies and the up-and-comers. If you turn to the next slide, you can see specific companies, Tencent in blue, Alibaba in orange, and Meituan in green, their price history over the past 5 years. Pretty volatile, but there's a tremendous opportunity there. What investors need to do is identify the trade-off between fundamentals and valuation. And stocks that are trading over 70% below its peak, where the fundamentals have started to improve, regulation in China has started to come down, there's real opportunity here, particularly in Tencent and Meituan from our perspective. Alibaba is a little bit more of a mixed bag.
Alright, thank you. Bapak Ibu, tadi saya bertanya tentang China. Ini sebenarnya pertanyaan mirip seperti kemarin ya. apakah China ini masih bisa diinvest gitu? Karena banyak yang berpikir China itu kita udah nggak bisa invest di China lagi. Dan outlooknya seperti apa untuk teknologi giants seperti di China ada sebutannya ATM ya, Alibaba, Tencent, dan Meituan. Meituan itu seperti Gojek kalau di Indonesia. Dan tadi Mike mengatakan bahwa tadi ada weighting ya, ada chartnya mungkin boleh ditampilkan lagi. MSCI EM, Emerging Market, China itu dulu hampir 40%. Sekarang ini tinggal sekitar 20%, ya 34% ke 21%. Nah dengan itu otomatis uang banyak yang keluar dari China. Nah ini salah satunya disebabkan oleh anak perusahaan Alibaba and Financial yang mau IPO, pas udah mau IPO tiba-tiba pemerintahnya masuk, tanda kutip di crackdown, lalu kita nggak pernah dengar Jack Ma lagi sampai hari ini Bapak Ibu gitu ya. Udah jarang banget dia muncul di sosmed. Nah ini membuat environment China ini investor jadi agak takut gitu. Karena Jack Ma yang speak up tiba-tiba kok kayak diberhentikan oleh pemerintahnya. Nah itu membuat sentimen jadi gak bagus. Tetapi kalau dilihat harga sahamnya mungkin bisa kembali ke slide yang tadi. Itu dari titik tertingginya mereka itu si Tencent itu 45% udah turun daripada level tertingginya. Jadi harganya tinggal 55% dari titik tertinggi. Alibaba Meituan bahkan 70%. Secara fundamental mereka udah cukup baik, udah improving, valuasi sangat-sangat murah sekali. Begitu. So Mike and Will, what do you think will happen when the Fed cut rates to technology sectors, be it the mega caps or the medium or the small? What is the effect of Fed rate cut to the technology sectors overall? Will?
Sure. I think if the Fed cuts rates, it'll certainly be positive for equities, regardless of the market cap size. Having a lower cost of capital will certainly make it easier for companies to service any debt, floating rate debt that they might have. And in general, it'll provide stimulus for the economy, which is good for everybody, which will be good for companies. But particularly, you mentioned a particular point on smaller companies, which tend to have higher amounts of floating rate debt. We believe some of these smaller companies will actually benefit disproportionately relative to some of their larger peers.
Right, Mike, do you have anything to add?
I agree. I really welcome a Fed rate cut. I think the next easing path will do wonders for a broadening out of market participants from a stock perspective. You know, Rich touched on earlier that I got in my hotel last night at 9:30. I turned on the TV to CNBC, and for the next hour and a half, it was all NVIDIA, all mega cap technology, which is great. When the Fed cuts, I don't want to talk about a rotation because I still think that there's a place for US mega cap technology in people's portfolios, but I really welcome that broadening to not only the small and mid cap portion of the technology sector, but geographically away from the US into developed Europe, into Latin America, into Asia, and other sectors as well. There are a lot of asset classes that have been performing fundamentally that have just not been rewarded by investors because of the uber focus on a macro level on what's the Fed going to do and when are they going to do it. And the only beneficiary of that environment up to now has been US mega cap technology. And I really welcome the broadening out of the markets that will benefit all of us here in this room.
Alright, thank you so much. Bapak Ibu tadi saya bertanya tentang apa yang akan terjadi ketika Fed cut suku bunga. Apa yang akan terjadi terhadap sektor teknologi? Dan jawaban dari William tadi adalah ini akan bagus tentunya untuk semua orang, sektor apapun itu kemungkinan akan bagus. Tetapi tadinya orang itu berfokus, investor hanya fokus ke yang besar-besar aja, Nvidia, Magnificent Seven kita sebutnya ya. Tapi dengan penurunan suku bunga nanti, Mike mengatakan nanti bukan ada rotasi. Kalau rotasi itu keluar dari yang mega cap, masuk ke yang menengah atau kecil. Yang terjadi bukan rotasi, tetapi broadening out. Artinya yang mega cap tetap akan bagus, tetapi orang akan mulai lebih berani lagi, lebih banyak masuk ke yang medium to small cap gitu ya di sektor teknologi. Jadi orang tadi hanya fokus Magnificent Seven, sekarang broadening out. Jadi lebih lebar, lebih luas gitu Bapak Ibu. Mereka akan mulai masuk ke saham-saham itu. Dan bukan hanya dari segi tadi small cap atau mid cap aja, tetapi ini juga akan menguntungkan mungkin salah satunya kita yang di Asia, di emerging market, negara maju, negara berkembang. Karena orang mungkin akan mulai keluar dari Amerika, akan mulai cari perusahaan-perusahaan lain yang sebenarnya selama ini bagus, fundamental bagus, tapi nggak diperhatikan karena orang masih fokusnya ke Magnificent Seven gitu ya Bapak Ibu. Nah jadi ini secara overall dengan the Fed cut ini akan sangat baik untuk dampaknya untuk kita semua dan hopefully untuk aset di Indonesia juga ya Bapak Ibu. So my next question will be on US election. Is there any differences between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? I mean, what is the effect to US technology sectors? Let's say if Trump wins or Harris wins, which is more favored by the tech companies? Mike?
I'll let Will take that, being the US expert.
All right, here goes. I think we're looking at a time period where there's a perception that the Democrats under Kamala Harris victory would mean potentially more regulation for technology, for other sectors such as healthcare. There's a general perception that Democrats tend to overregulate and potentially create headwinds for businesses. Under Trump presidency, under Republican administration, there's generally a perception that Republicans are friendlier towards businesses in terms of regulation, taxes. But that being said, I think that's the simple answer. But the reality is, government cannot enact legislation alone through the president. It will require agreement from different houses of government. And as long as there's consensus, legislation can be passed. But if it's divided, some of that regulation might get watered down in the final form. Other than near-term impacts, which people will likely react to headline risk, over the longer term, what we've observed is that regardless if it's a Republican or Democratic government, the longer-term impact for equities is actually quite negligible. Shorter term, you'll likely see stocks react in favor of one president or another based on where they are in polls. But over the longer term, the impact from either a Democratic or Republican administration is actually what we've observed to be quite negligible.
Right, thank you. Mike?
I agree completely with him. You know, as an American, I see the debates and the division that's permeated the United States for several years now. It feels like it's become even more divided than it has. But to Will's point, in the long run, markets have performed equally under both parties in the White House and in Congress. And I agree with Will that you might see some short-term movement based on anticipated actions, but in the long run, it should be status quo for most people and most industries.
Right, thank you. Bapak Ibu tadi saya bertanya tentang dampak election, US election terhadap sektor teknologi di US. Tadi Pak William mengatakan kalau Kamala Harris atau Demokrat biasanya tendensinya itu over regulation. Jadi menciptakan regulasi-regulasi yang kurang friendly terhadap bisnis gitu ya secara garis besarnya. Sedangkan kalau Republikan, terutama Donald Trump, businessman gitu ya, dia maunya deregulation. Jadi dilihat dari general ini aja, kemungkinan secara relatif akan lebih baik nih di zamannya Donald Trump menurut Will. Tapi kalau untuk long term effect, itu akan bagus, mau siapapun itu nanti jadi presiden akan bagus untuk saham. Nah ini cukup mirip dengan jawaban yang kemarin ya Bapak Ibu. Jadi memang ternyata setelah pemilu itu malah dampaknya bagus. Nah kita harapkan di Indonesia juga begitu ya, kita kan habis pemilu juga, semoga IHSG tahun depan makin kencang, BCA all time and terus, amin ya. Nah kemudian tadi Pak Mike juga ada tambahkan juga, jadi over the long term memang siapapun itu nanti yang menang, memang nanti akan bagus buat equity. Nah, mungkin satu poin terakhir yang saya ingin highlight tadi, Pak William mengatakan ini juga ketika mau membuat sebuah regulasi itu, jadi begini, poinnya dari Pak William adalah pas kita bicara soal US election, tidak cukup cuma bicara presiden. Kita harus lihat juga House-nya, DPR, House dan Senate, DPR MPR-nya itu nanti yang menguasai siapa. Karena itu akan sangat menentukan regulasi-regulasi yang nanti juga keluar, Bapak Ibu. Jadi pada kesimpulannya uncertainty masih ada Bapak Ibu, nanti kita saksikan sama-sama apa dampak dari pemilu Presiden Amerika dan terhadap market di luar negeri dan juga Indonesia.